Hi, thank you for joining us today. I'm Kenna Griffin. I'm the Director of Programming and Engagement for All Counseling, and we're thrilled to have Allison Hauser with us today. Allison is a mental health counselor who specializes in depression and anxiety. She runs her own private practice, which also includes remote teletherapy services. And you can find out more about her practice at Allison, two L's, Hauser, HAUSER.com. Did I say your last name right, Allison? I hope I did.
You did.
Perfect. Good. So, welcome. It's great to have you here today. I know that we're having just a little bit of a lag. So, we'll try to make sure that we have a little pause between Q&A so we can be on the same page. Perfect.
Sounds good. I'm going to try joining with my phone as well.
Okay. All right.
Recording in progress. Recording in progress.
How is that?
That's actually a little bit better, I think.
How is that?
Yeah.
How is that?
That's actually a little bit better.
Okay. So yeah, we'll make do by doing it by my phone.
Isn't technology fun?
It's lovely, yeah.
So I'll go ahead and get started with asking some questions of you, and then if those who are joining us have any questions, y'all can just drop them into the chat, and I'll try to monitor that as well for you, Allison, and ask any questions that they have. So I read that about 64% of people who have a diagnosed mental illness feel worse during the holidays. What are some common reasons that people experience depression or anxiety specifically around the holidays? Like, why would they feel worse during this time?
Yeah, I get that often of what is it about this season, maybe more than any other time. And yes, there are some very unique factors and conditions related to the holidays. We see a lot of uptick in admissions to treatment centers and rehabilitations for a reason, because there's this added stress. But it's exactly that question of why. Why, so I think we need to walk it back. What's going on in this time, in this season, and what's uniquely coming up for you? Your life, your situation, your personality, and this time in particular. So that's where I would start with really anybody experiencing difficulty right now.
So, do you have an example when you're walking it back of what that might look like for someone? Someone maybe that I mean, I know you can't really talk specifically about your clients, but how do I get to that, inner layer to really understand what's going on with me right now?
Allowing yourself to be with you and another person, say a therapist, openly and honestly expressing any thoughts, dreams, feelings, emotions, memories that come up about this time, or where it takes you from there. You may not know the answers until we get there together in therapy. I certainly won't know what's going on for any one particular client until we get there together. So there's no hard and fast track or pattern necessarily, but there are common themes around expectations, pressures from family or norms, differing values and opinions, maybe disapproval or approval and still seeking that from others and family naturally. Early childhood experiences coming to the forefront related to anything from sitting at dinner, receiving a gift, or a scent, from like a Christmas cookie, who knows? So there are all these things, all these tessellations that could potentially be illuminated. It's a matter of, let's start where you are and just speak on it.
You know, it's so much more challenging than people might think, because it's like you said, it's not any one thing. It's not like we can just go, it's because of the holidays. Well, yes, but what about them? Right? What brings out that stress? And I for me agree with the idea of the expectations, right? And I think that that's one of the things that sort of brought me into this idea of talking to you about this, was that the expectations around the holidays are so great. And we think that everyone else is happy, everyone else is giving the perfect gifts and the perfect wrapping. And I saw just a meme or something on social media that said, stop participating in traditions that leave you broke and unhappy. And I thought, wow, that's really good advice.
Yeah. And, if someone, let's say a client came in saying, hey, I saw this article and it suggested, I don't need to engage in things that make me broke and unhappy. Situate it in their context of, is this a pattern that resonates with you elsewhere? In what ways are you showing up in your life that end up making you broke, that end up making you leaving on a situation unhappy? Like the holidays want to be the first time this comes around, but the holidays have a great way of showing that pattern.
Yeah, so you're saying, whatever I'm feeling during the holidays really isn't unique to this time. I'm just noticing it then.
Probably, yeah, probably not. Although there are unique situations, but we're always the same person throughout the whole year.
True. So what about, it seems like everyone's going to holiday parties and they're surrounded by friends and family all the time. And, what about for those people who maybe don't have that? How do I combat loneliness during the holidays?
If a client came in asking how to combat loneliness, I would ask them about that word, combat. You could choose of all of the words possible. How do I deal with? How do I live with? How do I accept? How do I combat? Combat means something to that person. So I want to hear about that. What's your relationship to loneliness? Okay, it's something maybe you need to battle. There's a war going on. There's something that's pointing to an internal conflict here. Eventually, maybe I might suggest or allude or collaborate with them on what would it mean to lean into the loneliness. Not to say that it's how we should live life forever and ever. That's how you should learn to be in life. But can we look at it with curiosity? This loneliness that's coming up now, is that happening elsewhere? How often? Do you always end up feeling that way? Is there something about being with your family that makes you particularly lonely? If these are any and all possibilities, that may help us understand that person better.
So what about sadness? You specialize in depression and anxiety. And we think that people maybe shouldn't feel sad during the holidays. They're such a happy time. So what if I am feeling sadness or depression? What are some tips for coping with that?
That whole component of shouldn't feel X or Y or Z, I think is the place where I would start to examine that, because that again signals a relationship to that feeling. I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't feel sad. What if you could? What if it was okay to? Would that change things for that person? And maybe it would, but what's coming up to where they are prevented or blocked from allowing themselves to feel sad? I think the holidays in particular amp that up. It's a time of celebration and joy and festivity, and we should be celebrating this right now. And if you're not feeling joy and celebration, there's something wrong with you. I think that's amplified during this time, but I don't think it's the only time this shows up. So it's another place to unlock. Has this happened throughout your life? Is this an expectation or a norm or a value in your family, for instance, where you weren't allowed to feel sad or big emotions? Maybe they know, maybe they don't know yet, but we find out together. So looking at that should, that signals a judgment really about one's feelings. And of course, that's mirrored by celebration of holiday season. There is that judgment of be grateful, be positive, be happy.
So you would say, coming to the realization that it's acceptable to feel sad, even during the holidays.
Yeah.
But what then if I don't want to have that feeling right now? I want to feel happy like I think everybody else does. How do I get there?
Well, from my perspective, to find the pathways to freeing up ways of doing life differently, feeling differently about our life, we first have to start with what it is I'm feeling. And are there any blocks in our way to allow us to feel the feeling right now? So that should is a place where we would start. Maybe then I can accept feeling sad after so many sessions, after so many moments of working with me or a therapist. Maybe then after that, no guarantees, of course, I can't promise acceleration and nirvana and positivity always. And I think that would be a really gross miscalculation. But if we could learn to accept all of us, all parts of us, including all of our feelings, maybe there's a way to be not just okay with it, but happy about feeling and being in tune with all of us.
So what about anxiety? Which again is another of your specialties. How do I minimize that during the holidays when I have a lot of activities going on, as well as just regular life and regular stressors?
I think when we think about minimizing anxiety, and this is sort of where I'm taking like a very paradoxical stance again, of like, what if we didn't try so hard to minimize it? Because often we fight and we try to ward off and we try to diminish or shut down those feelings of worry for fear that they'll get bigger and bigger and bigger. And by nature of the worrying and the stuffing and the filling and distracting, we're avoiding feeling the anxiety and the worry, and it just compounds. What if we offered space to hear from that part of you that's feeling anxious?
How do I keep from saying, okay, I'm feeling anxious and sort of unpacking that? How do I keep from allowing that to become rumination where I'm just spiraling?
Depending on the person, it's possible that the rumination about the anxiety or about other things they're specifically or generally anxious about is already happening. And that's something that we would look at is, okay, Is there a fear that the anxiety is going to persist and become even greater if we turn towards it? Let's just stay there and talk about that fear. Let's look at the wall around the anxiety before we try to jump over the wall or through the wall.
I do think sometimes just recognizing this as an anxious thought or this is an anxious feeling is really super helpful, because then you can begin to use that logical part of your brain that goes, I'm having an anxious feeling, I'm having an anxious thought, but that doesn't make it true or accurate or realistic that, this thing is going to happen that I'm being foreboding about, right? And so I do think identifying that is super helpful. One of the things that I wanted to be sure and touch on here is that this is not just about people who have a diagnosed mental health condition. People who don't have depression or anxiety or another diagnosis still can feel really stressed during the holidays. And it feels often like it's like a really wonderful time, but also a very stressful time. How do we deal with that or cope with that stress? How do we make it happier and less stressful?
Part of me wants to give tips and tricks and easy ins and outs. So part of me will go there and say, take breaks, take a walk, say no, say yes, go towards the things you want and away to the things you don't. Eat meals, drink water, sleep well, keep to your routine if that helps you, or don't keep to the routine if that helps you also. And those all have their place, and those are all valuable strategies, and those are easily Googleable. And if you're committed to sticking to them, they can help decrease that stress. Yeah. And there's part of me that I would be doing a disservice if I didn't say there are things that likely get in the way of us doing those strategies throughout our year, not just this season. It's being highlighted now, yes. But let's get curious about what's getting in the way of us taking care of oneself. That opens a doorway for more exploration. And that's when I would suggest psychodynamic therapy to understand more about oneself.
So I've got to get maybe a little bit uncomfortable to grow completely, not just during the holidays, because you're suggesting that if I feel really stressed during the holidays, chances are that I have those feelings at other times too. So again, going back and exploring the why behind that.
Yeah.
I like to think too about, sometimes I'll really stress about that perfect gift for someone, or sometimes a family member will say, I just don't know what to get one of your children or something like that. And it's like, then get them nothing. Like, it's okay. We don't want this to be stressful for you. And so I kind of like to turn that on myself sometimes. Like, how would I respond if I knew someone was stressing about getting a gift for someone in my family or having the perfect holiday meal or whatever? Like, I wouldn't want that for them. Right. So why am I doing to myself what I wouldn't do to someone else? Which I think is valuable to consider, like looking at it from a different perspective and saying, I wouldn't do this to me. Or I wouldn't do this to someone else. Why am I doing it to me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in keeping with the theme here is it's coming up as an example illuminated during holiday gift season in this one particular moment of whether or not to get the gift. But in what ways does that question come up, or is even hidden throughout the ways we decide or not decide throughout the rest of our life?
Mm-hmm.
I'm treating myself differently from others. Let's look at that.
Right. So it's probably maybe like you said before, a desire to please or putting more pressure on ourselves. It could be a whole myriad of things that come from that originate somewhere.
Yeah, it could be a desire to please, but it could be something else. And that's when we find out together.
Yeah. So you and I had an interesting conversation about this when we were preparing for this webinar, because I talked to you about some of I'm a college professor, and some of my students I have heard talk about the stresses of going home for the holidays, and I've heard this more. I think the last maybe 5 years, right, where they say there are all of these loaded topics of conversation now. And it can be anything from, the relative who always asks, do you have a boyfriend yet? Which makes anybody uncomfortable, right? But also social issues and political issues and, knowing maybe because of social media or other reasons, people's differences in views today more than we ever have, and sort of preparing yourself, and maybe even being a little bit on edge that something's going to come up that's going to upset me, or I'm going to feel like I have to defend myself or my view or, people around me. How do we navigate? I don't know why, but it seems like Thanksgiving is the one, I guess, because we're sitting around at a meal, right? How do we navigate those uncomfortable or sometimes even inappropriate subjects that might come up with family members?
Some general ideas, either not being at the table altogether, if that's something that resonates for them. You could choose the pathway of speaking up about your own opinion or not. You could choose to get up and walk away or tolerate the situation. Which one do you do normally? Does that work for you? If not, what's going on there? Does this happen in all of your relationships? Is it just particular to this one person or this one group of people? Say more about that. So, I wouldn't say, oh, okay, well, whenever this topic comes up, you should just leave the table. I mean, the client might very well decide that that's exactly what they need to do, and good on them. Sometimes we don't know what's best for us until we look under the hood and see what's underneath. And Thanksgiving's coming up in a week. There's not much time to get psychotherapy done in a week. Maybe you choose differently this time just to see what would happen. Or you choose the same and get curious about how you're feeling, what thoughts come up in the moment. Allowing yourself to get curious about what's going on for you inside. Just start to open the door.
It's also okay to say if you think it's right, it's okay to say, I don't think we should talk about this today. Right? I mean, it's okay to say, this isn't really a Thanksgiving politics aren't really a Thanksgiving conversation. Right? And change the subject if that feels right at the time. I have found myself, we're raised with that, especially here in the Midwest. I think we're raised with that respect your elders mentality. So often I have sat through conversations that were very uncomfortable for me and maybe even made me super angry, because it didn't seem appropriate to speak out. Of course, the older I get, the less I do that, which is probably not a good thing. Calling people out on their views, it might not be the best, but I think maybe that's not a healthy way to go about it, to sit and deal year after year or family meal after family meal, with other people's views that are harmful or hurtful. Maybe it is better to just say, I don't think we should have this conversation. And just sort of, I guess that's agreeing to disagree. I don't know.
Could be.
What about family? Family is so complicated. I was just talking to a friend about this yesterday, that, all families kind of have stuff, right? Because people have stuff and there's baggage that they bring to relationships. What do we do if there's that maybe somewhat even toxic relationship, but people still want to gather with someone we're not comfortable being around?
Let's look into the discomfort. What's coming up around this discomfort? Are there body sensations? Are there thoughts? Are there memories with this person and how people continue to gather? Feelings? How has it impacted you? Do you still want to proceed and attend? Do you feel obligated? I mean, there's a million ways to go, and I would be remiss if I said this is what someone must do. And here's why. Because as a therapist, it's my job to essentially remain grounded and removed from the tensions from that decision making, because it's not my decision to make, it's in a sense yours, the client's. If I was to come in and say, this is the way to your happiness and well-being, it's to attend or to not attend, then I, as the clinician, would be missing the plot. There's a conflict going on inside you about whether to attend or not. There's a conflict going on inside about whether to face this discomfort or not. It's probably coming up right now as we're speaking to it, this discomfort. Let's stay there. Let's feel that and see from there how you choose to proceed.
I think a lot of people don't recognize that they have choice, that there is a choice not to go. There's a choice not to expose yourself to something that doesn't make you comfortable. And you don't owe anyone a deep, meaningful explanation if you choose not to. I think a lot of people feel like they have to because it's expected of them or because it's family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I like that you say, to go or not to go, right? There's an option. There might even be some kind of middle option, right? Which might be to go when that person's already gone, or, before they get there, or whatever the case may be. So recognizing choice, I think, is really important too.
Yeah. Which, in my clinical experience, recognizing choice first comes from recognizing our feelings. Maybe we never got the choice to recognize our feelings. So what happens now if we recognize them together? Oh, I can choose to turn towards my feeling or not. I can then maybe open up to understanding ways in which I haven't chosen myself, or I haven't chosen the thing I wanted, or I've chosen to go along. There starts to be a sense of, oh, I don't always have to X or Y. But that first starts by reverse engineering into, oh, I'm connected to my feeling, and what is it saying, and where there's the tension to not move towards it or into the thing that's easier or the default, right? It's exploring a space of not knowing what to do yet can open up a new option.
It sounds incredibly empowering too when you say it that way. Like, I can recognize this is why I feel the way I feel. This is where it originates, right? This is how I feel, and I have choices of how to respond.
Mhm.
All of that sounds incredibly empowering, especially like you said, if someone feels like they had a default expectation.
Mhm.
Yeah. One of the common questions is, I even found this as I was like looking at questions that people often ask around this topic, when I'm just Googling and looking at what are some of the things that come up a lot. One of the common questions is it normal not to feel happy during the holidays? So I posed that to you. Is it normal not to feel happy during the holidays?
I mean, I might not exactly say this in a session, but it's normal not to feel happy at any time, any time of day, any time of week, any season. It it would actually be strange if we were happy all the time. I mean, this is the human experience, right? And I think a lot of what psychotherapy can offer is getting comfortable with experiencing being human.
Where do you think that comes from? This idea that we should just be, Stepford level and be all the time.
Psychodynamic theory focuses a lot on our early childhood experiences and our family of origin. I mean, of course, our family learned it from their family, learned it from their family, and that makes up a society. And then we create cultural messages. I mean, and then it just compounds and exponentially multiplies this sense of, let's not turn towards and accept and look into and be okay with feelings other than happiness. There must be a reason for that. There must be a strategy that even made that adaptive at one point or many points. It must have served someone, must have served parents, it must have served then you as a child to not feel sad and to just buck up, right? And good reasons. Good reasons. Maybe it got us through certain moments, or it got us to meet our needs for love and attention and support from, say, mom and dad, right? And then you multiply that through generations, you multiply that through cities and cultures and advertising, and then, biblical texts, who knows, right? And it's everywhere as a hidden message.
As a media practitioner, I'm not a fan of the blame the media narrative, but I can't help but think of social media when we're talking about this, and how, we hear don't compare your real life to people's highlight reel. But I wonder if that's where some of this expectation is reinforced, like you said, where it seems like everyone is beautiful and happy and engaged all the time on social media.
Yeah, and it's, not to place blame squarely on media. It's squarely on humans. Sure, humans create media, create the advertising, create the Instagram post, but let's walk it back to there was a drive to avoid the feeling of not happiness for a reason. And whatever that may be, it's now persisted and has infiltrated into relationships, including on social media.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's an interesting idea of, and then how do you undo it when it's so ingrained in who we are as a society? You can't undo it for everyone, I guess. You just have to focus on you, right?
Yeah, the therapist in me is going to say you start with yourself and you go to psychodynamic therapy, and maybe we see ripple effects outwardly, or maybe we don't, but that's maybe less so the point. And I can't help but imagine if we had this compounding effect where everyone went to psychodynamic therapy, what might change in our advertising, for example, or how we present on social media? I have no idea, but it's an interesting question.
So I'm going to throw you a little bit of a plot twist here. I hope it's easy. But I think really anyone and maybe everyone could benefit from therapy. What's your position on that? Is therapy for everyone? Or who's it for?
I wouldn't say all therapy is for everybody. There are many types of therapy. They all exist for their own reasons. Some are better at certain points in people's lives than others. Some personalities don't take to therapy whatsoever. And that's okay. As a therapist, my job is to understand who would be suitable for working with me, knowing how I work, knowing how I perceive things. We start with a consultation session or 2 or 3 or 5 to get on the same page. Why are you coming in? Why now? And how can we work together? Of course, the client may not know. They might not even know why they're coming in, but that's what we try to find out together. And if we agree, okay, this is the reason, and yes, I agree to speak openly and honestly about anything and everything that comes up, my job then is to highlight and confront all the ways in which we hide or block out feeling and saying things openly and honestly. And they say, okay, I'm game. Then we focus on all of that exploration. So that's how I work as a psychodynamic therapist, and that's a modality stemming from psychoanalytic thought. There are other modalities like CBT and DBT, for example, where if you're, coming up against a lot of frustration in what I'm saying and are not resonating with it and say, I just need strategies right here, right now to deal with this week. I mean, I would be curious to look at that discomfort coming up, that need to solve and have it fixed right now. But if that's not what they wanted to look at, right, that may mean they're not suitable for working with me in my modalities. And maybe a DBT handbook about taking a walk, taking your meds, hydrating, taking a break would totally serve them well.
That was going to be actually my follow-up question, because it's very important to you, and you expressed this to me coming into this webinar. It would be easy to answer every one of these questions with, you should do this, or you should do that, or you should try this. And it could be something simple like, buy fewer gifts, buy simpler gifts, agree to avoid gift giving. There are all kinds of, like you said, tips or tricks that you can offer. Why is it important to you not to approach your practice and helping your clients in that way?
It doesn't always work. I mean, I don't think anything always works, but I have a lot of folks who come to me saying, I've done therapy and it didn't really change much for me. Yeah, I fixed this behavior. Yeah, I'm not doing something destructive now, but I still feel fill in the blank. I still have this trouble with this relationship. I still repeatedly end up feeling blah. Those types of strategies fall short when it comes to addressing root issue. So that's where my type of work and many clinicians and all psychodynamic clinicians come in, is what's underneath it. And that's not the dominating thought in like pop psychology right now. When you see it on social media, or even you go to a CBT therapist, right? They may suggest that it's a choice to feel happy and it's a choice to go buy the gift or not. Yes, and let's walk it back first. Oh, you don't feel like you have a choice. Well, if I tell you have a choice, it's not really going to land because you don't feel that there is a choice. Right. And so that's when we look at the feeling there. So that's sort of a sneak peek of what psychodynamic therapy would offer and why.
Right. So telling me to go outside and touch grass might make me feel good right now today. But I think you're suggesting if I don't get to the root, then I'm going outside and touching grass every day for temporary relief.
And hey, we love touching grass, but I often find people coming in saying, I tried meditating, I tried a box breath for 8 seconds, and my mind was everywhere or on this thing. What gives? Because I'm trying things and it's not bringing me that relief.
Sounds like tough work, like deep work.
Mm-hmm. Certainly can be. Yeah.
But in your view, more helpful or valuable for overall?
I would say helpful and valuable. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess the question I'm trying to ask you subtly is why did you choose this type of therapy? Like you said, there are tons of modalities out there. So why this paradigm? Why this approach?
I think it's a matter of, yes, it being important and significant in helping others, and also where my own interests come to meet how I can serve and how other people need help.
Okay. So as we're wrapping up here, any additional advice or final words for people as we're moving into the holidays?
Be curious about you.
Ask yourself, why do I feel the way that I am feeling? Where does this come from?
Get curious about the feeling and the question.
Great. I'm looking to see if we have any questions here in the chat. I don't see any, but if you have any questions, you can go ahead and drop those now for Allison. We'll give a couple of minutes. Thank you so much for being here. I know that you're a busy person.
Thanks for having me.
And we can find information about your practice on your website. And you are currently taking clients. You're in Florida, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But you do quite a bit of remote. Is that correct?
Throughout the state. Yes.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Not seeing any questions, so I think we'll wrap up. Thank you so much, Allison. Anything else you'd like to add before we leave?
Thank you so much, Kenna, and to all counseling.
Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.